edition. We're here. Block Party's back. I'm your host, Mike Wahle. Thanks for watching. Didn't do a show on the Bears game because the Packers didn't show up and play. I figured why do a show on it. But thanks for watching. I'm your host, Mike Wahle. Listen, follow me on Mike Wahle68 on Twitter, Process to Perform on Instagram. You can obviously grab our show on our YouTube channel on Process to Perform if you want to check out these videos. Certainly share, retweet, like, all that stuff, whatever you got to do. Our show is always sponsored by BetOnline. BetOnline continues to be your world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting. Whether you're a seasoned fan or a first-time bettor, BetOnline is your ultimate game day companion with the largest selection of odds on everything from football to the NBA, college basketball, hockey, UFC. BetOnline is the number one sports betting source for the new year. From touchdown to three-pointers and hat tricks, BetOnline has you covered on every game, every play, and every win. BetOnline, the game starts here. Like I said, Packers. The game looked like the last week's game. I'll just sum it up and say it like this. You lose for the first time in 5 years to the Bears. Obviously, there's just been a long history of us beating them. I remember when Lovie Smith came in, he said their number one priority was beating the Packers. And it's like, it's great, but you got to aim a little bit higher. It feels that way. It's going to be that way with whoever the new head coach is for the Bears. Thomas Brown, congratulations to him. I don't think it's going to be him. They'll bring in a name that's a little more recognized. Certainly, they'll probably screw it up because that's what they do. I'll say this. That game really felt like a scrimmage up front. I actually, without starting to name names, I was watching the offensive line on our team, and I go, God, I thought a couple of guys were hurt. They were playing so slow. Or maybe I was watching the game in slow motion. But sometimes it happens. Listen, you have bad games against bad football teams. Sometimes you play down to their level. That's the reality in the National Football League. But listen, we made the playoffs. And I think the only negative thing if you're a Packers, if you're in that locker room, is like you couldn't have made this more difficult on yourself because you have to go to Philly first. I think you could have gone to Tampa if things would have worked out. I think with the Commanders winning, it didn't really matter. But this is a hard road to. Eagles are a really good football team, and you're looking now at, is it going to be Eagles, Vikings? Like, how does that whole work out? This is a really hard road to the Super Bowl. It'll be interesting to see. Listen, you never want to in week one condemn anybody, but this is as hard as it gets. Those are three really good football teams. I think when you get into the Philadelphia Eagles, obviously they started the year just like they have the last 2 years, where they kind of start maybe a little bit slow. They certainly found their stride, and a lot of that is because the defense. They have a ton of star power on both sides of the football. But they've really taken a step forward on the defensive side. Vic Fangio comes in. Obviously they've been like a finishing school for Georgia. Georgia's been a finishing school for them, I suppose, the last couple of years. Guys like Jordan Davis. I mean, some of these guys on the defensive line are a problem for this for anybody that they play against, and they're a big reason that. This football team is I think number 2 in points. Let me get that right. Number 2 in points at 17.8 points per game, and then number 1 total defense at 278 points yards per game. 278 yards per game is an absurd number. If you think about you're in the National Football League, all the rules that are favored for offensive players, for the systems, quarterback ratings, all of that stuff, and like 278 yards a game. To be able to put up those kind of numbers in this era is really, really special. When you see this football team play, I look at defensively. I look at you've got your Nolan Smiths, you got your Josh Sweats, you got your Jordan Davises, you got a lot of really the defensive tackle position is loaded. Some guys, they get rid of Hargreaves a couple of years ago, and they're still really, really good. They've just done a great job of drafting and developing. Really on both sides of the line. We'll talk about their offensive line later because they're phenomenal. But you look at the defensive line, and then you look in the backfield and in the secondary, and obviously Cooper DeJean comes in. He's a big name around Green Bay because we could have drafted him. Quinny Mitchell comes in, plays corner, does a really good job. Obviously they have C.J. Gardner-Johnson. They still have Darius Slay. I mean, they've got dudes back there. And then there's kind of this middle area in the linebacking room, and they're good players. But you look at Zach Bond, you look at Nakobe Dean, and you go, okay, maybe that's where we need to attack because Oren Burks, because there's really not room to attack anywhere else. I mean, these guys are really, really good football players. And what you're going to see is, listen, they're not infallible. Vic Fangio has a very specific style of defense. It's a lot of Brembito break stuff. You're going to see safeties really, really deep. You're going to see that space between kind of the first line and the third level of defense really, really huge. The linebackers going to get sucked up a little bit. The linebackers don't always play downhill, so they can make tackles, 5, 6, 7, 8 yards past the line of scrimmage. But that defensive line is really, really good. A lot of movement, maybe more movement than I expected watching. I went back and watched the Dallas game. Last week's game was kind of a waste. So I went back to watch the Dallas game to get a bit better feel of what they're doing. A little bit more movement than I expected. I think some of that has to do with the fact that Dallas is a lot more stagnant than the Green Bay offense. So you're able to kind of plan those things out a little bit more. It'll be interesting to see what they do against Green Bay. And a lot of that stuff when you're moving, they've got good players and they're moving. So it's a lot of feast or famine. They obviously feel really good about it, but what they do a good job with, whether it's with movement or just letting those guys like Jordan Davis and Smith and all those and play, or Sweat play downhill, is they're getting you behind the sticks. And they're getting into second and longs and third and longs. And that's when I think this team does really well. They're just always putting teams behind the sticks. I think, the easiest way to say this is offensively, if you want to do well against this football team, you've just got to stay on schedule. And it's like, how do the Green Bay Packers do that on first down and second down in particular? Obviously, we have some answers there. You start talking about Josh Jacobs and the year he's had. I think he broke a couple records, at least tied a couple records. I know he had the most yards rushing, I believe, since Amon did it back in like 2003, 15 touchdowns. So hats off to him. He's just been a phenomenal weapon for the Green Bay Packers. But having said all that, if they are not able to exploit Josh Jacobs early as they have been able to do in really this entire season, it's going to be difficult, because establishing the running game, establishing that cadence, that rhythm on the road in Philly against this defense with that crowd in this environment, going to be really, really tough, because what they are really good at is maybe not in my opinion, our strength. So let's check out this defense first and foremost. Listen, you can go to they're playing a 3-4. Really, they got 5 guys in there that can stop the run and rush the passer. It all starts with those 3 guys in the middle, though, and really they want to get into these situations. You got to win your single blocks. 19, Josh Sweat has been a really, really high-level player, I think, for them for years. He's going to win here against the tackle and just fight off. And they've got so many guys at line of scrimmage that are going to commit to the run, especially when you see that the 12-21 personnel looks that Green Bay will show from time to time. Very, very good at disruption, very good at movement. You see 98 Jordan Davis in there. I mean, they got a couple third-round draft picks, a couple guys that are in second, third year in the league that are they're not household names. Really, really good players. Jordan Davis is different than all of them. Jordan Davis is different. He is absolutely problematic. The way that he can jump from gap to gap at his size, and he can go from A gap to B gap to A gap really, really fast. Just huge problem, man. Huge problem. Both these guys are really good, though. See 93 with the arm over swim. Both get in on the play. And just a ton of movement. And you can read a lot by their stances, certainly. But you just see the press on the right guard. We win backside against the tackle. There's just guys, every person across the line is more than capable of beating their guy. You're looking at these teams and you're looking, okay, where's the fish? Where's the guy that we can exploit? Where's the backside cutoff that's going to be easy? Against these guys, it's not really there. You're really going to look, and this is the other thing, and sometimes when you're watching tape, you have to take some context. Green Bay doesn't run anything as basic as the Dallas Cowboys run stuff. And this is one of the reasons, their guys are always, every year you're like, are they going to get fired or not? But compare their offense to like what Matt LaFleur is running, as far as window dressing pre-snap. And there's just nothing like it. It's just, it's apples and oranges. So a lot of this stuff is just a little bit too basic, in my opinion, to get a really good feel of what Green Bay is able to do against a team like the Eagles, or I guess I should say vice versa, what the Eagles are defensively to be able to do against Green Bay. But you see here just the pursuit, penetration in the backfield over and over. You can see the tackles are just exasperated. Excuse me. You see here the square stance by Jordan Davis. You got to be able to read this because he can take a big step with his right foot, rip underneath, get penetration, game's over. Backside player makes the play. He ends up getting thrown back. But it's, this is the kind of stuff where you have to be aware, you have to be ready, and you'll see even when they are, sometimes it's not good enough because he's, so fast, so big. But this is where communication, this is where coaching, this is where scheme development and kind of that football IQ all comes into play, because it's going to be imperative that if the Packers can see this, if one guy can see it, right tackle, right or left tackle sees it, and they can communicate it down the line of scrimmage, now we really got a chance to cut those slant looks off. Because when you do get slant looks, those are opportunities for huge plays. I think this guy's a 3rd-round draft pick. I mean, just the speed, he does that swim move, beats the center. Obviously doesn't make the tackle, but really makes the tackle. They're just, it's all over tape. No matter what game you turn on with these guys, they penetrate, they beat their guys one-on-one. They do a good job of beating doubles a lot of time on the play side, better than the backside. They can beat single blocks on the backside as well. But they ask a lot of those guys, and they do a hell of a job. We get into the secondary. And one thing you're going to see over and over, I think, is, first of all, just look at the deep drop from the safety at the snap. Regardless if it's play action, shotgun, anything, that guy is dropping first and foremost. And, Fangio's, listen, I bet you can't go 80 yards on me. That's his whole thing, especially with the D-line they have. They have guys in the secondary that can make plays. They play off a lot. And, again, everything's in front of you. They don't want to get beat deep. They'll put some pressure on. But even when they put pressure, it's not going to be just – sticky man-to-man coverage. They're going to give you a little opportunity to throw because they don't want to give up those big plays. You have to, against this defense, exploit space. You see here, they've got 15 yards of space between that second level and that safety. They're running a little bit of poach there in the middle, or robber with the free coming down. But you have to be able, when you get any kind of press coverage, you have to be able to exploit space. You have to be able to make those throws, and you have to win one-on-one, particularly on the outside. They're trying to take away the inside throws. Give yourself a chance on the outside. The safety cannot get there to make the play on the ball in that kind of medium to long range pass. He's looking for the deep balls, and then underneath they're going to try to get the inside stuff on the in cuts. But if you can throw them, you think about that Romeo Dobbs, 15-yard out that he runs so well. Jordan Love throws so well. Those things are going to be open all day. Look at it again. Safety, just look at the depth. This is play action, and there's just so much room here on the bottom of the screen. I mean, look how open really we were at the 45-yard line. They throw this ball underneath, but you're just wide up open on the 45 because of the space the safeties give. They're going to bring a little pressure here. This is just, look, this is one of those schemes that you can look and say, okay, the Packers are going to run this. Bunch, start in a bunch, motion outside with the inside receiver. They bring pressure. Backside linebacker gets caught up on who's filling, so pressure, but they bubble the running back, and the pressure follows. Backside linebacker gets screwed up underneath the crosser. Big gain. This stuff happens with every team. I think the more movement that you get when you move, and then you have forced these guys, because they got some sort of dog blitz pressure coming. You move, and all of a sudden the rules change a little bit at the snap. That's when you get the big plays, particularly if you can run a lot of picks and crossers. These guys, I'm not saying that. Well, let's get into this first. So they're gonna slant the defensive end. Usually, when they're slanting like this, you're going to see one of two things. You're going to see that will linebacker really come down strong into that C gap and force the action, or you're going to see a safety or a nickel slot coming off the edge. You don't really see either here. They're going to give you time. And when you give time here, so you can pass off this game, 54 is not in a position to make the play on the tackle. He's late. Now there's a huge gap to be exploited. You see that nickel guy coming late there. That's what happens when you don't have this all timed up, right? The Eagles, even in this game versus a known opponent, it was surprising. There's a couple plays in there. There's enough big explosive plays where you go, there's room for exploitation, I think, of scheme with the Green Bay Packers, or particularly in all of the motions and what's the word I'm trying to use, Mike? Pre-snap motion and switch sets. Shifts, excuse me. What a terrible word. Shifts, boys and girls. Here we go. So not pressing on pressure. So we bring the nickel slot. You can kind of read this if you're the quarterback. You got the slot covered up. They go across. They go to trips. They bring pressure. And everyone's playing a little bit off, particularly on the outside. Or you got your back turned. And these plays are open. And I think they're going to be open all day because look, again, how deep that safety gets. And you're really just trying to not get beat deep. And they're going to give up some of the short stuff. They brought two to the strong side there. And if you can't pick it up, or if you have it picked up, and I don't think this is one of those deals where it's going to catch the Packers by surprise. If you get it picked up, first of all, it's probably the best thing you can do just from a line standpoint. It makes it easier to block when those guys have to take a specific gap. We've talked about this before. Pressure, if it's communicated well, is easier to block than straight one-on-ones. So if we can pick it up, you're going to have time to throw. And if you have time to throw, they're going to give you space to throw all those in-cut, out-cut routes. They just don't want to get beat deep. So movement can be costly. So we're going to get a slant off the right guard from that 3 technique. And he's got penetration. But because we cut off the backside here, talking about the Dallas Cowboys, they don't even block the right guys. And this is what I'm talking about at the linebacker level. Like, there's plays to be made they don't make. They get blocked easily at the linebacker level. Dallas Cowboys have a good offensive line, not great. If you can get these guys covered, and sometimes they, instead of penetrating, you can see it by their footwork. If they think you're going to run some sort of wide zone or double, they'll start widening with you. And if you can cover up and hold on and not let them take an edge, stay squared, stay on your track, they will get antsy. You'll watch 97 here. He dips inside, outside run. And that's literally just a function of kind of not wanting to hold your ground and hold your gap and trying to make a play. If you keep pressure, keep track, keep your feet moving, I think on a lot of these guys, they're going to try to peek backside. And when you do that, your running back can exploit, particularly the way that Josh Jacobs runs those jump cuts. Got to take care of the double teams. These guys will give you time at the second level. You see, they're just not downhill fire squad guys. I think it's easy to block them at the second level, relatively speaking. And listen, we're happy to fall forward for 6, 7-yard gains every single time. This is what we saw from the Packers last year. You know, to be honest, if you talk about what we're doing at the linebacker position, this year so much more downhill. You see the contrast. You see how much more. I think visually it's fun to watch, but I think effectively creating a demeanor and a culture in that room is a little bit different. These guys do it more with the penetration at the defensive line position, not as much with the linebackers. I think it's a really good football team on defense. It's going to be a tough game. I go back though, and I think we're going to have a scheme and a system that's going to really pressure their leverage and their numbers. And when you just look at film, it's easy to watch film and pull things apart. What's going to come down to is, can you win your one-on-one matchups on the field of play? If the answer is yes, you're going to have a lot of success, obviously. But I guess what I'm saying is there's nothing about the scheme that they are doing that is difficult to ascertain or to plan against. What is difficult is the execution because of the talent of the players on their roster. So I think that's a little bit different than some of the teams you'll see. You would argue that a lot of the success of the Packers, particularly in the run game, Josh Jacobs, number one, but number two, they do such a good job of manufacturing yards with all the window dressing, the shifts, and the motions. You see maybe that some of the real great teams in the National Football League right now are using that more and not relying on their offensive line, not that we're not using our offensive line. I want to be clear about that, but we get so much free yardage out of the hesitation that the motions and all the stuff behind the line of scrimmage causes for the linebackers and the second level defenders. I think that is such a big part of the offense. You don't see that as much, I guess, if you flip that maybe on the Eagles offensive line or the Eagles offense in general. But you don't see that you can contrast that with the Eagles defense. Vic Fangio stuff, I mean, they're not doing anything that you can't see and plan for. It's can you actually cut Jordan Davis off when it's time to cut him off? Now, offensively, this game for me is really about whether or not Jalen Hurts is healthy enough to play. He's coming off the concussion. The Eagles have, I don't know who the best offensive line in football is, but these guys are pretty good. They can do anything you ask them. I like their left side. Their center just made the Pro Bowl, replacing Jason Kelce. I like this left side with Dickerson and Mailata as well as any left side in football. I think they are really, really good. Lane Johnson's been an All-Pro for so many years. Saquon Barkley, they pick him up from the Giants. Everyone knows the story. He could have gone for the rushing record in 17 games, not 16, so whatever that means. But he's on an absolute tear, obviously. It's amazing what happens when you finally have some guys up front that can give you some space. Speaking of, Mekhi Becton comes over from the Jets. He's playing right guard for these guys. Mekhi Becton was effectively not going to be a player in the National Football League. You come over with, arguably the best line coach in football, one of the best systems in football, or the culture that they have, developing offensive linemen. And now guys are really, really effective right guard, right? So where you are matters in this sport. Let's talk about just aside from Saquon, aside from Jalen, there's speed all over the board. You've got one of the best receivers in the league, A.J. Brown, and he's good at like the physicality that he plays with. You talk about AJ, you talk about DK Metcalf. There's just guys that are a little bit different physically, I think, in those rooms than maybe other rooms in the National Football League. Obviously, they have Devontae Smith from Alabama, just an absolute burner. Dallas Goedert has always been a really good tight end. Just, I don't know if this had his best year this year, but historically, as a pass catching, receiving tight end, one of the better ones in the National Football League. These guys are second in rushing the football this season. I think they're first in rush percentage, second in yardage. What that's going to do sometimes is bring your total scoring in yards per game down, because obviously throwing the football is, with all the rules and everything, is more effective than rushing football. But what they do is, and they're still seventh and eighth respectively in scoring in yards per game. But what they do is they control the clock, they control tempo as well as anybody. And it's going to come down again to, this is a completely different football team when you don't have Jalen Hurts running or having the threat of running all their RPO stuff. If he's in there, really, really good football team. If he's not, they're going to really have to rely on Saquon, the offensive line, and then, backup quarterback. How many times can you get the ball to AJ? How many routes can you throw to Devontae Smith? I can just tell you firsthand from a concussion, if he's cleared, you usually don't see any lingering effects. I know that hasn't been true with everybody across the National Football League. Think about, in particular, Tua down in Miami. But in my experience, at least, not having to process as much information as quarterbacks do, I would say you don't really experience any lingering effects from concussions the week after. Let's check out this offense. And the first question you got to ask yourself is, who do you want to take away? You're playing defense against this team, and I think the obvious answer is we have to stop Saquon Barkley. The problem with that is, if you want to go, particularly if you want to go single safety, obviously Jair is out now. You're trying to figure out if Stokes, which one is Stokes going to cut? How does this math work, right? First play of the game, you see some of this. Devontae Smith just, nights, just runs right by your corner. Like, the rest of the game, you got to sit there and start scratching your head. And this can happen early. And it can happen at any time. This guy's an absolute burner. The pocket that is created repeatedly, not only by the quality of their offensive line play, but with the threat of the run, the RPOs, all the pistol stuff they do, they have time to run a lot of stuff on schedule. But because the athleticism of Jalen Hurts, because of the physicality of guys like A.J. Brown, guys like Dallas Goedert, they have the ability to run a ton of stuff off schedule as well. I mean, obviously, every team can do that in the National Football League now. But when you have a quarterback that's a 600-pound squatter that can run, that can throw the football as well as he can, you can really make a lot of hay with off-schedule plays. And this is something where, from a secondary standpoint in Green Bay, you're going to have to understand as hard as it's going to be with our lack of pass rush to get to the quarterback anyways, and they're going to have to make that decision early on. Like, are we going to have to bring pressure? If we do bring pressure, do we feel confident that they can beat the guys that are blocking them? And what does that do to our secondary? But if you do get him moving, even if you get him moving laterally, he can still make plays with his legs and obviously throwing the football. He's a little bit different than we talked about a couple weeks ago with Sam Darnold, where if you take his chest to the sideline, you don't have as much success. You put his chest downfield, he can throw the ball anywhere. That's not the case here with Jalen Hurts. I feel very confident I think he feels very confident that he can throw the football running sideways. Certainly some of these guys can make plays on the football as well. And this is like, so they run a real basic in cut here at 5. Receiver gets kind of caught up on the inside, the slot route, and you don't see the safety in the middle of the field coming down to make a play because they're trying to double, and it's like, I mean, forget about it. You're not catching this guy. Just too fast. So have to have a plan. Have to understand in the secondary, what are we trying to take away? How are we going to use our linebackers? Do we want to force the ball downfield more and try to play deep safety with Xavier McKinney and just see, hey, if you're going to throw it up, we like our chances? Or do you want to try some of the catch and run stuff and try to keep them in front of you and try to make some tackles, in space? Now you're looking at just a lot of human right here across this offensive line. These are not small humans. Landon Dickerson's an absolute monster. Mekhi Becton, I think he came in at like 385 pounds. I don't know what he weighs now. I think he's lost some weight. But good God. Lane Johnson looks skinny right here. I think he's 325. You see the doubles. And this is the problem with Saquon. And Saquon and Josh Jacobs are very similar. Saquon's a higher rated guy, I think. Higher draft pick. And, certainly when you just look at his like natural athleticism and explosiveness, they're off the charts. But, you're kind of looking in the mirror if you're a Green Bay Packers fan. All the stuff you love about Josh Jacobs, you're going to hate this week because this guy does the exact same stuff. The jump cuts, the vision, everything. Just, two really, really good football players at the running back position. But that should be a play. And it turns into a 20-yard gain. He's not afraid to lower his shoulder. Obviously, he's got the huge highlight this year of doing the backwards leap. We got the pull, and you see the jump cut running through. The kid is, it's going to be fun to watch and kind of compare these guys when you get to see them face to face. I know we played these guys earlier in the year, but you just feel like the identities of this team with new running backs are really crystallized now, obviously, going into the playoffs. This guy played behind Jason Kelce for years and now is a Pro Bowler in his own rights. And you see the two linebackers for Dallas looking at themselves, and they're having a communication about who's going. And I had to watch this 3-4 times because he knows. He knows which one's dropping because his footwork here, this is double A gap look. Now, whether they bail or not, for the viewer at home, we have no idea. They're going to motion in Barkley, and they're just going to run zone to the right with a little split flow action. You can see 81 where he's lined up. That's kind of a tell. Okay. But watch the footwork of 51. Like, he's not worried at all that guy's shooting the gap. He knows that he's bailing. And that level of football IQ, that's why Jeff Stoughton's one of the best offensive line coaches, if not the best offensive line coach in the league right now. These guys they're playing chess, not checkers. And he's taking a route to where the guy's going to be, even though he's up in the A gap. And look at what the result of that is. 5 yards downfield, he finally locks up with him, gets through, and the guy can't get it on the play. Phenomenal job. You got two pullers here. You're pulling, the mountain, the rugby mountain, Jordan Mailata, phenomenal athlete, and obviously pulling the center again. We've seen this for years with Kelsey playing center position there. So we get the kick out and we got the lead up. Look at the lead up by 51, man. I mean, he just buries that linebacker. I mean, that is big time job. Barkley's got, again, you give talented guys that kind of offensive line, and you really got something there. These guys, I think I just circle them here. I mean, that's as good a group as you're going to find. And one of the big questions has to be, who's beating Lane Johnson? Who's beating Jordan Mailata? Who's beating Landon Dickerson? Like, where are you winning on this offensive line, given all the stuff that they run? Watch Micah Parsons over here against Jordan Mailata. I mean, athletic, and he's not even close. I mean, he wins both hands, the whole thing, but because of the set, I want to bring this up too. I don't want to digress too much, but I watched this, and it didn't really. I was watching the Malik Willis drop back last week, and you realize that these guys they employ kind of the same philosophy in pass pro, and we talked about it last year and this year with Green Bay, but the geometry of the pocket's changed, obviously, with the advent of or the proliferation of the shotgun. And it's turned much less into this cup idea into kind of maybe a little bit of a bent wall of defense. And these guys are all sitting square. And it just, the time that it takes for these defensive ends and linebackers and defensive tackles, to get back to the quarterback if they're being blocked at all is so dramatic. Malik Willis's foot was hitting 12 yards last week. I mean, that's a crazy depth, and they're staying there. He's going from 12 to 11 or 11 to 11. He's not stepping back up to 9 unless he gets flushed, unless he has a reason to. And what that does on the outside is, and you can see it here with Micah Parsons, because Mailata and Lane Johnson do such a good job of staying square and kicking back, that the route that the defensive ends has to take just to get over the top or get to level is so high that if they ever do win and get over the top, the quarterback has so much room to step up because he's shotgun 5-step drop. Not here, but if he does shotgun 5-step drop, hits his foot at 11 or 12, and the guards and the centers aren't going to get beat back for 8, 9, 10 yards most of the time. So he's going to have all this built-in space. And so it's just really interesting to see, because not all teams are employing that philosophy. But you see here, it's so easy. I mean, Parsons is thinking like, man, I got something, but you're like 3-4 yards from home. And that's the way that a lot of these teams are employing their pass concept. So how do you win against a team that is great up front and so good at the running back position, and obviously has a quarterback thing to do the job as well? It takes a full commitment. You see 10, I think this is 10 Dallas defenders on the screen in the box or around the box. This is what it takes. Close to the line of scrimmage, everybody downhill, got to win on the edges, got to force the cutback, got to force them to stop their feet in the backfield. If you can get them reverse direction, you're in even better shape. They run the split flow. And because we see eyeballs here, he's got to bounce out and not cut back. And it's almost like you're winning on the backside, and then you're just hoping that he decides not to make you look stupid. The exact same thing that we talk about with Josh Jacobs. It's not always going to be pretty, but unfortunately, this is kind of the look here. So Mailata, he's staring at the backside defensive tackle. We got kind of a wider 3 technique. He's going to take a bad first step. He's going to false step behind him. So this 3 technique ends up winning. And these are the kind of things you have to be able to see. If he's looking at you, follow the guard, try to win through the gap, make him cut back, and then the next guy's got to make the play. And that's really how you're going to have success against a team like this, because they're so good at the running back position. They're so good at offensive line. Their scheme is tried and tested, and they're going to run it 55% of the time. So this is going to be one of those games. I think on TV it might go fast. You're hoping that Green Bay wants to stick with their running game, and again, this is one of those games where if Jordan Love has less than 30 attempts, you feel really good about it. If he's got more than 35, 40 attempts, it's like, Game's probably not going how you want it to. Having said that, I could be, Coach LaFleur can just say to hell with it. We're going yard. But this is going to be a phenomenal game. I know it's a 4.5-point spread, and I think that's probably deserved. The Eagles are a really, really good football team, as are the Vikings, as are the Detroit Lions. The Packers have the talent and have the spark, and they have the belief, and they, most importantly, they have the offensive mind at the coordinator position, or the head coach position, where they can put some points up against this team, even though they're giving up only 278 yards a game and 17.8 points per game. I mean, as good as Philly's defense is, as if you watch the tape, you can see how a really good schematic offense with some really talented positional players and a great quarterback can put some points up. It's going to be a fun one. Guys, enjoy the weekend. Hit me up, MikeWall68, if you have any questions about this game, any game. I'll try to get back to you as soon as I can. Process to Perform on Instagram. Please hit the subscribe button, rate and review us, and share this with your friends. Guys, thanks as always. Thanks to Bet Online, and we'll talk to you soon.